on the jagged fringes of the city, where the concrete gives way to gray, dead earth, the Silvershadow Circus sat like a rotting carcass. It had been shuttered for 30 years, ever since the night the lights went out, mid-performance, and half the audience simply evaporated into the fog. I am Aris, a photographer whose eyes were perpetually glued to a 35mm viewfinder. I believed that if a shadow couldn't be caught in a frame, it wasn't real. But that belief shattered the morning I found the ticket. It was wedged in my doorframe, the color of a fresh bruise, with single entry embossed in a gold leaf that felt like cold skin. As my fingers brushed it, the sterile, morning air of my apartment was replaced by the suffocating, cloying stench of burnt sugar and old wet fur. It was a summons. That night, led by a morbid fascination that felt like a hook in my gut, I crossed the rusted perimeter. The circus was a graveyard of silent machinery. I walked past the collapsed big-top tent, my boots crunching on broken glass that looked like fallen stars. Then, without a sound, the carousel began to move. There was no hum of a motor, no spark of electricity, only the agonizing, rhythmic groan of ancient wood grinding against rusted iron, sound like 1,000 voices trying to scream through gagged mouths. I approached the lead horse, a pale, eyeless creature with its wooden jaw frozen in a silent neigh. Taped to its neck was a photograph. It was a high-resolution shot of me, taken from behind inside my locked apartment, just 10 minutes ago. On the back, written in my own frantic handwriting, were the words, "Your turn, Aris." The lens is waiting. The camera around my neck suddenly felt like a heavy, cold anchor, dragging me deeper into the center of the spinning wheel. The mechanical moaning of the carousel followed me like a physical weight as I retreated into the gaping mouth of the Hall of Mirrors. I raised my camera, seeking the safety of the optical glass, but the mirrors had turned into traitors. At first, the reflections were just... When I stepped left, the Aris in the glass hesitated before following. Then, the reflections began to lead. I watched my own image walk away from me, deeper into the silver maze, while I stood frozen in the real world. I chased it, stumbling over my own shadow, till I reached the dead Centaura hexagonal chamber where every wall was a window into a different version of my own fear. In the furthest pane, I saw him. The reflection. He was wearing my jacket, but it fit him too perfectly. He was clutching my spare lens, but his hands didn't tremble, and then he turned around. His face was a sagging, terrifying mask of melted beeswax, and where his pupils should have been, there were only bottomless, ink-black voids that seemed to swallow the dim light. This wasn't a trick of optics. It was a harvest of my identity. I lunged for my phone to call for help, but the screen was a blur of static. I felt the thick cables behind the mirror frames. They hadn't been cut by a tool. They had been gnawed through, chewed by teeth that were hungry to sever my connection to the light. The darkness in the maze began to pulse with a slow, heavy heartbeat, a rhythm that started in the mirrors and began to vibrate inside my own chest. Syncing my pulse to the circus's dying breath, I burst through the exit of the maze, my lungs burning, only to find myself standing on the decaying stage of the Grand Puppet Theater. The velvet curtains, heavy with the dust of 30 silent years, parted with a slow, agonizing creak that sounded like a long-forgotten secret. In the center of the stage, bathed in a single, flickering spotlight, sat a miniature replica of the entire circus. It was a masterpiece of obsession. Every rusted bolt, every broken mirror, and even the tiny, eyeless carousel horses were accounted for. And there, sitting on a tiny wooden chair in a replica of the theater, was a beeswax figure of myself. Its hands were twisted, the tiny wooden wrists snapped and splintered. The fingers curled into agonizing claws. The moment my eyes locked onto the figure's broken wrists, a searing, white-hot agony tore through my own arms. I dropped my camera, watching it shatter on the stage floor in slow motion, but I couldn't even reach for it. My hands were no longer mine. They were being tethered to the model by a law of physics that defied everything I knew. I was becoming a prop in a play I didn't write. From the darkness of the rafters above, the sound of wet, heavy footsteps began to echo. Someone or something was descending the spiral staircase, savoring the sound of my whimpering. The door to the stage creaked open. It was him, the reflection. He walked with my stride, adjusted his collar with my specific, nervous twitch, and looked down at me with those hollow, light-drinking eyes. He knelt beside me, his breath smelling like old candles and ozone, and whispered in a voice that was more me than my own. "Rest now, Aris. I will capture the shots you were too afraid to take. Your eyes are mine now. Kanka, O Masalza, V. Karanalik, Atmospheri, Alikarine, Kadar, Hisamin, Ikin, Kelamelari, Adeta, Bursis, Bulutu, Gibu, Yadum. Finale, Arisen, O Dark. Rudabetli Malzandeki Karasislagini, Ve Ukaradaki Yansuma, Nun Kusur Suza Luganu, Her Ditella and Latin Devasa, Burmetin, DNTRDM, Eat the Carousel of Whispers Sarissinin, O Epic. Upazun Final Party, Part 4, Final. The Eternal Echo and the Carousel Ultra Deep Extended. From Aris's perspective, I am no longer a man. I have become a subterranean heartbeat, a secret buried beneath the decaying floorboards of the Grand Puppet Theater. I exist in the suffocating, interstitial void between the cold, indifferent earth and the hollow performance above. This lightless, damp crawl space has become my entire universe, a lightless cathedral of rot where the air is a stagnant soup of decomposing sawdust, ancient machinery grease, and the metallic, bitter temps of rising groundwater that tastes of old coins and drowned memories. Above me, the massive oak planks of the stage act as a cruel drumskin, amplifying every vibration of a life that was once mine, but has now been stolen with surgical, terrifying precision. Every single morning at exactly 8 a.m., the sonic torture begins. I hear the heavy, confident, and maddeningly familiar tread of his boots, my boots moving with a purpose I never possessed toward the kitchen area. I can hear the cheerful, domestic whistle of the kettle, the rhythmic grinding of fresh coffee beans, and the constant, mocking chime of my smartphone receiving messages from friends, family, and colleagues. They have no idea they are texting a waxen monster. They are sharing their secrets with a hollow shell that mimics my empathy with a chilling accuracy. The shutter of my 35mm camera clicks the sound that breaks me every time. It echoes through the floorboards like a firing squad's execution. The thing out there is documenting my new life with a haunting, predatory genius that I could never have achieved. It doesn't just take photographs, it harvests souls. It posts to my accounts with a sophisticated wit, wins prestigious international awards I only dared to dream of, and attends high society gallery openings, where it shakes hands with a calculated warmth that is nothing more than a thermal mask hiding the void beneath. The world now believes that Aris has finally reached his creative peak, that the Silvershadow series is the masterpiece of a generation. No one suspects that the man they see bathed in the golden spotlight, the man who drinks their champagne and smiles at their jokes, is just a hollow, beeswax huska, perfect, silent, an unblinking imitation that never sleeps, never dreams, and never feels the biting cold of the night. Every night, at exactly 3 a.m., the hollow hour of the wolf, when the veil between worlds is thinnest, the floorboards directly above my head begin to groan under a deliberate, heavy weight. A single, massive crystal glass of deep blood-red wine is slid through a specially widened crack in the wood. It is a mocking, daily ritual, a sacrificial offering for the spirit I surrendered to the circus. I hear the dull, heavy thud of the crystal against the dusty, splintered floor, and sometimes, if I press my trembling ear against the cold wood, I can hear him breathing. It is a slow, rhythmic, and terrifyingly calm sound, smelling of ozone, burnt sugar, and old church candles that have been extinguished for decades. He doesn't speak to me anymore. There is no need for words between a masterpiece and its discarded draft. He simply exists in my place, occupying my space, breathing my air, and being more Aris than I ever had the courage to be. I rot here in the dark, A shadow of a shadow, watching the tiny, indifferent dust motes dance in the single, mocking sliver of moonlight that managed to pierce my prison. The most agonizing part of this existence isn't the gnawing hunger, it's the bone-chilling dampness, or the encroaching waves of madness. It is the slow, silent realization that I am becoming obsolete even within the confines of my own mind. I find myself forgetting the specific pitch of my mother's voice, the exact smell of the city rain on hot asphalt, the genuine texture of human skin that hasn't been replaced by wax. I am being systematically erased by a superior version of myself, a replacement that has no flaws, no doubts, and no heartbeat. If you ever find yourself wandering near those rusted, ivy-choked circus gates, drawn by a curiosity you cannot explain, or a whisper you cannot ignore, and you see a man with a vintage camera who looks a little too sharp, whose movements are a little too fluid, and whose eyes stay a little too still even when he throws back his head in laughter, do not ask him for a portrait. Do not let him frame your life within his lens. Because somewhere beneath his polished, expensive boots, in a hidden shelf lined with beeswax, broken glass, and the discarded rotting memories of a dead man, there is a space already carved out. It is measured to your exact dimensions, lined with velvet and shadows, waiting patiently for its next occupant to fall. I am no longer Aris. I am not even a ghost haunting these grounds. I am just a distorted, dying echo. A whisper of a man fading away forever in the cracked and silent mirrors of a circus that will never, ever let its collection go.